In the previous module, we had focused on the analysis phase, and in this phase, we were looking at who the decision maker was in the system, what were their key considerations for decisions, what were the performance criteria and the inputs. Now that we've moved to the design phase, what we're looking at is an understanding of how we're going to put together the tool itself. Just as a mechanical engineer would use a CAD system or would sketch something out before they print it or prototype it, and as a civil engineer would spend a lot of time building the design before they actually build it, we will be doing the same thing. As management systems engineers, we will be taking the time to put together a conceptual framework for our tool set before we go and build it in Excel or Tableau or whatever the end tool is. In this case, we're going to use Microsoft Paint, which is a very simple tool. You could also just use a piece of paper and a pen and be able to put together a sketch. You could use Adobe Illustrator, a variety of other tools to do this. But what we're essentially doing here is we're understanding how we're laying out the tool, how it's going to be used, and how we're going to do some of the data visualizations within it. A lot of people go directly to Excel. What we want to be able to do is have a concept and a framework before we go into Excel. So the first thing that we're going to do is, remember we had 3 performance criteria that we were looking at. One was a percentage of savings to your gross income. The other one was a percentage of debt, overall debt to gross income. And the last one was percentage of your home or rent to your gross income. And we had said that savings was going to be 10%, debt was going to be about 36%, home about 25%. But we want to make our tool flexible, and what we'll do is we will set those, because those are kind of best practice items, we will set those as the default values, but we will use the spinner tool to allow the user to make modifications to those threshold values. And they can make those modifications, and what we can do with the spinner tool is we can actually establish boundaries so that the model will be constrained to some certain boundaries for those particular threshold values. Now we'll also have a section where they'll just be able to enter in specific information, like, for example, gross income. They'll be able to put in their 401k contributions. And again, we'll use spinner tools for almost all of these items. For their 401k contribution, again, we'll put in, default is like 4%, 5%. That's kind of a minimum, and they'll allow them to go up from there. Then we'll have a section for all taxes. So we'll have a tax section where we'll put it in, and we'll also allow some modification there, but putting in threshold values for it. So for federal, state, and then Social Security and other things. Now, one of the decisions that we have to make is how we're going to group some of the monthly expenses. One way we could do that is by, for example, transportation could be your car rent, your car payment per month, maintenance expenses for your car, gasoline, insurance. But since we are looking at one of our performance criteria as total debt, what we might want to do is just have all of our debt items in one area. So student loan, car loan, home loan, because we'll be using the sum of these debt values to calculate our percentage of debt to your gross income. And then we'll just have at the very bottom a section for all other expenses, groceries, dining, other monthly expenses. Now, one thing that we need to consider here is that the values that we're using in our debt calculation, they're going to be calculated based on several different values. For example, the price of the home, the down payment, the interest rate, the number of payments. All of those are flexible, and what we might want to do is build 2 subforms, a car payment form and a home payment form, so that the manager or decision maker can use this to fill in the information that would then drive the values over here. 2 different ways of doing this. In our form, we can actually just have another subsection over to the side that gets referenced so that we put in all the information and the end result gets referenced in the debt calculation. Or a better solution would be to build hyperlinks next to car and home so that you can click on the hyperlinks and it would bring up a new form allowing you to fill in the information. I think that's a better way to abstract this for the end user, hide it in the background so that it's not taking up valuable real estate. And so we'll go with that as far as our design. So we're going to have 2 subforms, a car calculation and a home calculation payment. Now, when we calculate the final values here, you're going to, after taking out all your expenses and debt, whatever remains is going to be the value that you have in your savings. And so we want to highlight that. That's pretty important value. So we're going to highlight that at the very top in big, bold letters. And we're going to have one as the absolute value, and then one at the percentage value. And what we'll do with the percentage value is we will use conditional formatting on that. If you're above the threshold, that'll be green because you've met your savings goal. Below that will be red. So that's going to be an important thing for us to show. And then what we'll also want to do is have some bullet charts in here. And bullet charts are simply bar charts with a threshold or a performance value or goal that we're going to have to highlight how we did against our savings, our debt, and our home performance indicators. And this is just going to allow us to see how we've performed based on all of our other decisions. And then lastly, we'll throw in a pie chart. And I'm not a fan of pie charts, and most visualization experts would say that pie charts are not really great ways to visualize data. But since we only have 2 or 3 items that we want to really highlight, which is our savings percentage, our overall debt payments per month, and then all other expenses, and then maybe we'll probably also throw in tax. So we'll probably have 4 different categories here. Since it's a smaller amount, we'll show the percentage. We can use a pie chart for that, but we could also use a bar chart instead. Now, just a couple of points here. You can see that we didn't go into a lot of detail. We didn't outline each particular debt item and other expenses. What we've done is we've conceptualized where they're going to be on the form, how we're going to collate and collect the information, and how we're going to display it. That was the key to what we're doing in this activity, is we're just laying out what our design is. And then once we get into Excel, we'll start to flesh it out and put more detail into each individual item. But we wanted to start out at least with a concept of what our end result will look like. And that's really what we're doing in the design phase. As we get to the end of the design phase, we'll start to put that into Excel. And as we get to implementation, the implementation phase will be where we get user testing, make sure that it meets our end goals and is acceptable for the intended use in our management system.